The toaster was the first to turn on me. It was a Thursday morning, one of those plain, beige-colored weekdays that don't have the decency to be exciting or catastrophic. Just enough gray in the sky to make you feel like you're waiting on something: rain, news, an apology. The kind of morning where everything feels normal until it absolutely isn't. So I'm standing there, half-dressed, waiting for my toast, which has now been in the machine for a suspiciously long time. No pop, no scent, just quiet rebellion. I jab the lever like I'm negotiating with a disgruntled coworker. Still nothing. A small act of betrayal, really. And I should have taken it as foreshadowing. Laura breezed into the kitchen right then, all sharp lines and freshly ironed silence. She was wearing her Thursday blouse, the stiff one with the slightly off-center buttons, and humming. Now, this was troubling. Laura only hums when she's got something on her mind. Usually something she thinks I won't like new wallpaper or inviting her mother over. Toast not cooperating again, she asked, eyeing the toaster with a kind of bored amusement, like it had personally offended her before. Nope. I think it's unionized. She chuckled, barely. Her hand landed on the counter next to the mail, stacked as usual with bills, circulars, and the occasional threat disguised as an offer. She plucked one envelope off the top like it owed her money and slid her nail along the seal. Then she froze. Now, Laura doesn't freeze. Not even when she backed our car into a mailbox and blamed the wind. Not when our upstairs plumbing exploded and she casually kept stirring soup like it was background music. But that morning, she paused, staring at that letter like it whispered something obscene. She didn't say a word, just slid it back into the envelope and tucked it under the fruit bowl like she was hiding a candy bar from a toddler. Naturally, I was curious. Not in the spying way. More in the what kind of weird subscription have you signed up for now way. So when she left to finish her hair or speak dark incantations in front of the mirror, I took a peek. The envelope was from Dempsey High School. Now, we don't have kids, and neither of us works at Dempsey High School, but I sure remember that place. I graduated from there back when flip phones were the future and eyebrow rings were a personality trait. Laura? Well, she was a few years behind me, in the class of most likely to succeed in making you feel inadequate. I didn't even know she was on any mailing list, let alone one that involved official-looking envelopes with real stamps. Curiosity had its own gravity. Inside was a small invitation. Neat cursive letters embossed on heavy cardstock. Class reunion. 20 years. Drinks, dinner, dancing. That sort of nonsense. But none of that was interesting. What was interesting was the yellow sticky note inside. Slapped right on the corner of the invite, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Can't wait to see you again. Let's pick up where we left off. No name. No number. No context. Just that. Now, look. I'm not Sherlock Holmes. I'm more of a lose my keys in my own pocket kind of guy. But even I knew this was a breadcrumb. And I didn't remember Laura leaving anything off that needed picking back up. At least not at high school. So I did what any man in my situation would do. I did absolutely nothing. For 3 whole days. Why? Because jumping to conclusions is cardio for the paranoid. And I was trying to keep my heart rate normal. But then Sunday came. And with it, Laura's decision to attend the reunion. Alone. Oh, it's just a dumb night. You'll hate it, she said over eggs and a magazine. You can stay home and reorganize your tool shed or whatever men do when they're pretending they have projects. It wasn't the first time she mocked my sacred tool shed, but this time it landed a little harder. Who else is going to be there? I asked casually, watching the way she stirred her coffee like it owed her secrets. Just old classmates. You know. Mostly people I don't even talk to anymore. Mostly. She said mostly. I didn't push it. Not then. Instead, I waited until she left that night in her very average, unremarkable sedan, wearing her hair in the way she does when she wants to look accidentally perfect. I waited until she was out of the driveway and around the corner. Then I got into my truck and followed her at a respectable, morally great distance. Now, I'm not proud of this part. I didn't exactly grow up dreaming of becoming a midlife amateur sleuth. But sometimes life hands you a trench coat and a pair of binoculars and says, go nuts. I parked across the street from Dempsey High's gym, pretending to fiddle with my GPS, even though I wasn't going anywhere. People trickled in, dressed in varying degrees of regret and denim. I spotted old classmates I barely remembered and one guy I definitely remembered because he owed me $50 from a poker night in '07. Then I saw her, Laura, laughing in a way she didn't laugh at home anymore. Light. Free. Like she'd temporarily borrowed someone else's joy. And next to her, too close to be a coincidence, was a man. Tall, polished. That specific kind of tan you only get from golf and betrayal. And they weren't just catching up. No, they were orbiting each other like they had gravitational pull. She leaned in when he talked, touched his arm when she laughed. And then, when they moved to the dance floor, not even during a slow song, just something mid-tempo and nostalgic, he twirled her. And Laura twirled back. Now I'm no expert in body language, but that was not the twirl of someone reminiscing. That was muscle memory. And here's where it gets interesting. Because when the dance ended, and everyone scattered to refill their drinks and pretend they were younger than their knees felt, this man, the tan one, the twirler, walked off to talk to someone else. And Laura? Laura didn't follow him. She slipped out the side exit. Just like that. I watched her for a second, thinking maybe she forgot something in her car. Or needed a breath of air. Or maybe this was a side quest she had to complete before unlocking the next level of deception. But then she pulled out her phone. Not to text. To record. She started filming herself, face tilted up, with this ridiculous, soft-focus glow on her face. I couldn't hear what she said, but I didn't need to. She was rehearsing. Practicing. For a story, perhaps. One she'd tell later about the reunion. One where nothing happened. Just laughs, a few memories, and maybe too much punch. But I'd seen the twirl, the sticky note, and the way my toaster had given up on me the same week my wife might have. Coincidence? Doubtful. And that, my friend, was how I learned that toast wasn't the only thing that had gone cold in my house. Laura came back from the reunion in the same exact condition she left, smiling, smooth-faced, not a hair out of place, like she'd just returned from a dental cleaning instead of an evening surrounded by old classmates and one extremely tan threat to our marriage. She even had the nerve to hum again. It was a different tune this time, something more upbeat. A little too upbeat. You don't hum like that unless you've either gotten away with something or just remembered that you successfully returned a dress past the 30-day mark without a receipt. I was sitting on the couch pretending to care about a documentary on antique road signs when she walked in. She dropped her clutch onto the console table like it owed her rent, kicked off her shoes with the confidence of a woman who hadn't done anything wrong, classic misdirection, and headed upstairs to wash the evening off her face. Now, I had no intention of confronting her that night. That's not how I operate. I don't do drama in sweatpants. I plan to do what any man in my position should do. Observe, document, and plot quietly like a man considering a very aggressive Yelp review. The next morning, she was in a mood I can only describe as suspiciously pleasant. She asked how I slept, like we were suddenly pen pals. She even offered to make coffee. For reference, Laura hasn't made coffee since the Clinton administration. That alone should have triggered a house-wide investigation. But I smiled, told her I appreciated it, and let her think she was winning whatever game she thought she was playing. Here's where it got interesting. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the office where Laura works. Now, this wasn't a random drive-by. I've been meaning to pick up some paperwork from my accountant, and her building happened to be on the way. And by on the way, I mean I took a 7-mile detour. But that's neither here nor there. I parked across the street like I was casing the joint. Her building was one of those new, open-concept places with too much glass and too many plants that don't look like they actually need water. From my angle, I had a decent view into the lobby and part of the shared workspace on the second floor. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a weird vibe. Maybe she'd be eating lunch with someone too enthusiastically. What I wasn't expecting was the delivery guy. He came in holding a small white box, the kind you'd expect to find a watch or a gift card in. He handed it to the front desk person, who then walked it over to Laura's desk. Laura accepted it like she was used to this sort of thing. No wide eyes. No, oh, how mysterious. Just a calm, practiced smile and a nod of thanks. I watched her open the box. Her reaction wasn't over the top. She didn't squeal or gasp. She just read the card tucked inside and then, in a move that could only be described as theater for an audience she didn't know she had, she reached for her desk drawer, pulled out what looked like a set of old Polaroids, and tucked the new card in with them. Polaroids. Actual, tangible, 90s core photos. Not saved on a cloud, not filtered through 5 layers of Valencia on social media. Who still uses those? Unless, of course, you're sentimental about things that happened when phones still had antennas. So now we've got mystery deliveries and a secret stash of relics in our desk. And still, I waited. Patience, I've learned, is just passive-aggressive waiting with better posture. A few days later, Laura mentioned she had a book club meeting. Now, Laura doesn't read books. Not since a group of her friends convinced her that fiction was a waste of time and that self-help was the only genre that actually invests in your future. And yet, there she was, putting on lipstick for Tolstoy. I asked her what book they were reading. She blinked at me like I'd asked her to name all the moons of Jupiter. It's about mindfulness and gardening. Very meditative, she said, holding up a purse that looked like it hadn't held anything more useful than an expired lipstick and a grudge. Sounds riveting. Don't forget your trowel, I replied, and she gave me a look that said she didn't appreciate the sarcasm, which only made me feel like I was doing something right. She left at 6:45 p.m. I gave her a full 20-minute head start before I grabbed my jacket and keys. This time, I didn't follow her directly. I had a better idea. Laura's friend Denise is the kind of person who can't keep a secret if you paid her in non-refundable Botox. If Laura was supposed to be at her place for some faux literary event, Denise would be the one hosting it. So I called her. Hey Denise, Laura said she's at your place for book club. I just realized she left her phone charger at home. Mind if I swing it by? Pause. Long pause. Then Denise said, Oh, book club isn't this week. It's next Thursday. Bless you, Denise. You absolute treasure. Oh, I said, trying not to sound like I was already halfway out the door. She must have gotten her dates mixed up. Well, we are reading 2 books this month, she added, probably to cover for Laura, but it was too late. Damage done. Truth exposed. And book club now officially added to my personal list of modern scams, right under scented candles that smell like peace. So now, armed with that new information, I did what any mature, emotionally secure adult man would do. I called in a favor from the weirdest person I knew. Steve Knoll. Steve works in IT. Not like, turn it off and back on again, IT. More like, deep web browser history doesn't scare me, IT. The kind of guy who collects data breaches like baseball cards and can tell you your Wi-Fi password just by shaking your hand. We met up at his garage, which doubles as a tech lab and smells vaguely of melted plastic and regret. I gave him Laura's email address. Just tell me if anything's been coming in that doesn't look like coupons or newsletters from makeup brands she never actually buys. 2 days later, he emailed me a file. It wasn't huge, just a handful of emails, all from a Spencer_Fields 88. Spencer Fields. That's when everything locked into place. He was at the reunion. The tan one. The twirler. Turns out Spencer and Laura had been catching up for a little while now. The emails weren't overt. No declarations of love. No scandalous photos. Just enough banter and coded nostalgia to say everything they weren't explicitly typing. One message, though, stood out. I still have the yearbook note you wrote me. The one you slipped in the sleeve during gym class. Maybe next life. Funny how things turn out, huh? And Laura's reply. Well, who says this life is over yet? Well, I guess someone's been writing her own fiction after all. I didn't tell Steve anything. I just closed the file and thanked him with a 6-pack of whatever off-brand craft beer he pretends to like. And that night, when Laura came home from her alleged book club, glowing in that way that only people doing something mildly shameful do, I didn't say a word. I just asked her how the book was. She mumbled something about weeds and enlightenment. And I smiled. Because now, I had something better than suspicion. I had her yearbook, still boxed up in our attic. And I was going to find that note. Because if you're going to unravel something, it helps to start where the thread began. Laura has never shown the slightest interest in the attic. For the entirety of our marriage, the attic could have been a portal to a better life, and she still wouldn't have climbed up there. Which is why I found myself, on a Tuesday evening, elbow deep in our communal time capsule, dodging boxes labeled winter stuff and taxes 2013, like I was on a scavenger hunt sponsored by Poor Life Choices. I finally found the bin labeled High School Laura, written in her all-caps handwriting, which was somehow both confident and passive-aggressive. Inside, nestled between an old marching band t-shirt and a binder covered in Lisa Frank stickers that had faded into something more disturbing than nostalgic, was her senior yearbook. It still had that weirdly waxy cover that sticks to itself after 20 years in a box. Classic. I flipped through the pages until I got to the sleeve inside the back cover. And there it was, folded once, neatly, like it had been waiting. A little note. I didn't even have to open it to know it was the one. She doodled a flower in the corner. Laura only ever draws flowers when she's trying to look innocent. She even used to sign checks with them, until a teller asked her if she was 12. I opened the note. I meant what I said in Kim class. I really do wish things were different. Maybe next life. but just in case this life gives us a second chance. I'll remember. Always. L? No full name. Just L. But considering there weren't a ton of students in her class confessing their secret pining for tan classmates in chemistry, I felt confident this was our guy. Spencer Fields. The man who apparently went from missed opportunity to current hobby. Armed with this, I didn't do the normal husband thing, which, according to every TV show written by people who've never been married, involves dramatic confrontation in the kitchen followed by a lot of dramatic walking away. I wasn't interested in being the emotional fireworks show. I wanted information. And I wanted it from someone who wasn't actively trying to perform an award-winning role as innocent wife with a calendar full of book clubs. So I invited her friend Denise over. Yes, that Denise. Our walking, talking filing cabinet of accidental truth. Now, you might wonder why she agreed. Simple. I told her I had an old VHS tape labeled Senior Trip, Cancun, unedited that I found in the attic, and she needed to see it before I digitized it for the family archives. I have never seen someone arrive at our house so fast holding a bottle of wine and wearing what she clearly thought was her least regretful blouse. Once she was seated, comfortably unaware, I brought up Spencer like I was asking about some obscure actor from a movie nobody liked. Hey, you remember that guy Spencer Fields from high school? Tall, smug, looked like he moisturized with compliments. Denise blinked, took a sip of wine, and said, "Oh, you mean Laura's little reunion buddy?" Bingo. She mentioned him? I asked, feigning casual like I was barely invested in the answer. Denise shrugged. Yeah, kind of. Not directly. But she's been different lately. I mean, she suddenly started listening to that awful music again. You remember when she got really into alt-rock in senior year? That weird phase with the chain wallet. That explained the sudden appearance of those playlists she played while reorganizing the bookshelf songs that sounded like someone yelling in a garage but with feelings. She ever talk about what went on between them? I asked, now openly curious. Denise hesitated, which for her was a sign she was doing mental damage control. She fiddled with the stem of her wine glass and then sighed. Look, I don't know the whole story, but she used to have a thing for him. And I think he knew. But she was dating that guy. What's his name? Tyler? The one who wore flip-flops to graduation. Right. Tyler. The human equivalent of lukewarm oatmeal. So, I said, you think she still has a thing for him? Denise gave me that look, the one that says, I want to stay out of this, but I'm pathologically incapable of not spilling details. She's been weird. That's all I'll say. And she canceled on me twice for coffee, which she never does unless she's deep in some personal drama. That was all I needed. Denise didn't know it, but she just confirmed everything. But still, I didn't confront Laura. Instead, I did something better. I invited Spencer over. Oh yes, I did. I emailed him using the address from the email Steve dug up. I told him I was a fellow Dempsey alum, planning a little reunion follow-up get-together for people who used to hang out back in the day, and he said he'd be delighted to swing by. I didn't give him many details. I just said, Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m., my place. That Saturday, I cleaned the house like my mother was coming over. Not because I cared about Spencer's comfort, but because Laura had a very particular kind of panic when guests arrived unannounced, especially one she wasn't expecting. And I wanted her in that state of mind when the doorbell rang. So when Spencer showed up wearing one of those collared shirts with buttons that seem unnecessary, I welcomed him in with the kind of grin you usually reserve for someone who just parked in your spot but brought you a cupcake. Laura was in the living room, frozen, holding a magazine she wasn't reading. Oh, I said, all surprised. Laura, you remember Spencer. He's here for the little alumni get-together. Spencer turned to her, all smiles and cologne-level confidence. Laura looked like she just remembered she left the stove on in 2009. Oh, hi, she said. Her voice was flat in that special way that only occurs when someone realizes the game has shifted and they've been invited to a chessboard with no pawns. We stood there for a moment, in a triangle of mutual discomfort, before I said, Spencer and I were just chatting about old memories. Apparently you two had some classes together? Chemistry, right? Spencer chuckled like he'd been waiting for a setup. Yeah, we had a few memorable labs. Laura did not laugh. I continued. You know, it's funny. I was going through our attic the other day. Her eyes shifted. A full-body flinch, barely contained. And I found your yearbook. And a little note tucked in the back. I didn't realize you were a romantic back in the day. I left that hanging in the air like a bad high school gym sock. Laura said nothing. Spencer, meanwhile, Looked like he was starting to realize this wasn't a party. I turned to him and smiled. So, Spencer, since you're here, maybe you could help me understand something. His eyebrows lifted. Sure. Why write to a married woman? Why the reunion theatrics, the emails, the whatever this is? I gestured vaguely, as if gesturing at the full collection of nonsense they'd been quietly manufacturing behind my back. Spencer, to his credit, looked genuinely thrown. Look, Jason, I didn't mean. I cut him off, not angrily, but the way someone closes a book they didn't enjoy. I'm not looking for confessions. I just like clarity. And now I have it. He glanced at Laura, who was suddenly very interested in her thumbnail. He nodded once, politely, like a man who knows the door is no longer metaphorically open. I'll show myself out, he said. And he did. I turned to Laura, who still hadn't moved. She didn't say anything, probably trying to draft the right performance in her head. I didn't need her to speak. I just walked over to the couch, picked up the magazine she dropped, and sat down. Page 37, I said. The article on betrayal disguised as nostalgia is surprisingly on brand. And that's where I left it. Because sometimes silence isn't avoidance. Sometimes it's a mirror. Laura spent the rest of that Saturday acting like the power had gone out and she was trying to figure out how to pretend she wasn't home. No door slamming, no fake tears, no apology tour. Just a woman quietly deciding whether she was still ahead on points or if she needed to forfeit the game before someone checked the scoreboard. I, meanwhile, was having a remarkably productive afternoon. Not emotionally, I'm not a monk. But logistically, I was firing on all cylinders. You'd be surprised how much focus you can gain once the person you live with turns into an involuntary houseguest. My first move was boring but satisfying. I started organizing the filing cabinet in our office. The one Laura never used because it involved alphabetizing something without social validation. It was mostly bills, warranties for products that no longer exist, and that weird envelope of coupons she once cut out but never used because real people don't bring coupons to restaurants. Jason. What I was looking for wasn't in there. But I found something better. A folder labeled Career Stuff. Laura, which is what she named it back when she was deciding between 3 jobs and told everyone she was at a pivot point. Inside were her resumes, certificates from online seminars that taught her how to lead with confidence in 37 minutes, and a typed page labeled Vision Board, typed version. I have to say, I read it 3 times. Not because it was profound, but because the level of corporate optimism was genuinely hypnotic. According to her vision, by now Laura was supposed to be on the board of a consulting firm, mentoring young professionals, and cultivating a healthy work-life balance with my supportive husband and meaningful hobbies. I underlined the words supportive husband with a pencil and drew a smiley face next to it. It felt appropriate. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jason, why are you going through her personal folder? Isn't that, like, sneaky? Yes. Yes, it is. But there's a difference between snooping and research. And when someone's been emotionally outsourcing their loyalty to a guy who peaked in high school gym class, you are in the right to do a little research. Next, I logged into our joint calendar. Yes, we had a joint calendar. The same one she forgot existed unless it was time to add her dentist appointments. But I was curious now, had she really been that sloppy? Turns out, no. She hadn't been sloppy. She'd been clever. Almost too clever. There were entries like volunteer shift, strategy brunch, client drop-in. All things that sounded so tedious and low-risk I never questioned them. But here's the thing, Laura hasn't volunteered since 2016, hates brunch unless she picked the place, and once described her clients as a polite form of punishment. So I picked one random calendar entry, community strategy panel, 3 p.m. from 2 weeks ago, and called the number for the panel sponsor, listed in our email records from last year. I told them I was following up on Laura's notes from the event. Oh, that panel was canceled, the woman said. Low registration. We only had 3 signups. Well, I replied, at least she was loyal to the empty room. I didn't tell the woman on the phone that Laura had spent that exact afternoon recapping strategies over what turned out to be a suspiciously wine-heavy meeting with Spencer. Because who was I to deny their non-existent panel a fictional happy hour? That evening, Laura attempted to casually rejoin regular programming. She came into the room holding her laptop and claimed she needed help with her email settings. A bold strategy, pretending our relationship was in tech support mode. I think it's the sync thing again, she said, pointing at her screen with the same confidence she used to feign interest during documentaries. I nodded, looked at her screen, and said, you might need to clear some of the old data. Sometimes it slows down performance. She caught the double meaning. Her face stiffened slightly, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she set the laptop down, adjusted a cushion that didn't need adjusting, and walked back out. The next day was Sunday, which meant it was time for my favorite weekend activity, not talking unless I had something worth saying. Laura spent the morning doing what she usually did when she wanted to appear normal, organizing a drawer she hadn't opened in months. This time, it was the one in the dining room buffet where we kept napkin rings, coasters, and mysterious charger cables from devices we no longer owned. I watched from the kitchen, sipping coffee. "Jason," she said eventually, without looking up, "are you going to keep being weird, or do you want to talk?" "I'm not being weird," I said. "You're just not used to me being observant." That shut the drawer conversation down faster than a Zoom meeting with no audio. Monday rolled around, and I decided it was time for step 2 of my plan. Not revenge. I'm not that theatrical. I just wanted a more satisfying response than "we should talk." I made a post on our community page. A simple one. It read, "Hey neighbors, thinking of hosting a small, high school throwback gathering for Dempsey alumni. Adults only, casual dress, nothing fancy. If you went to Dempsey or know someone who did, feel free to message me. Just trying to connect some dots. Jason P." Now, this might sound like a passive-aggressive move, and that's because it was. But here's the thing. Spencer still lived in the area. And I knew someone who once mentioned his sister's roommate worked at a gym where he casually taught adult kickboxing. Because of course he did. By Tuesday, I had 5 messages. 2 from people I didn't know. 1 from a guy I vaguely remembered cheating off me in biology. 1 from Spencer's second cousin who said she had stories. And 1 from Spencer himself. "Hey man, got your post, fun idea. Let me know if you actually do it. Small world, huh?" I didn't reply. Laura saw the post 3 hours later. She didn't comment. She didn't mention it. But she did walk past me in the hallway with the quiet panic of someone who just realized the fire drill might be real. The next morning, the real fun began. I printed a few of the emails. Nothing dramatic, just enough to raise an eyebrow. Then I slid them into a plastic sheet and pinned them to the fridge like a third-grade art project. Laura came down an hour later and saw them. She stood there, reading them like she might find a different meaning if she just tilted her head. She turned to me. "This is private." "No, that's the thing. It's not. Not when it involves both of us." "I didn't cheat," she said, a little too quickly. "I didn't say you did." Silence. "But you're acting like." "Nope. I'm not acting like anything. I'm just providing context. Makes things easier when people don't have to guess what kind of story they're in." She stared at me. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. You've already said enough. Just not out loud." She folded her arms, like she was preparing for a negotiation that wasn't going to happen. "You're being ridiculous." I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not interested in pretending this is fine." She didn't reply. She pulled the papers off the fridge and left the kitchen. And me? I went back to my coffee. Because, unlike Laura, I had nothing to rehearse. It's a fascinating thing, realizing that your marriage is essentially a group project where one person has stopped doing the work and the other's still showing up with a color-coded binder. That's where I was. In the group project, holding the glue stick, watching my teammate scroll through someone else's slideshow. No, I'm not a dramatic man. I don't throw fits. I don't cry in parking lots. I don't disappear to clear my head and come back with a beard and a man bun. But I do believe in efficiency. And the current arrangement wasn't cutting it. So I did what anyone with a functioning brain and a moderately decent printer would do. I made a spreadsheet. Not just any spreadsheet. This one had tabs. Tab 1, Timeline of Suspicious Events. Color-coded by category, social outings, calendar fabrications, and assorted passive evasions. Tab 2, Spencer interactions, documented by date, medium, and phrasing level casual, flirty, Olympic-level nostalgia. Tab 3, Possible outcomes. With pros and cons. I'm not unreasonable. This wasn't revenge. This was housekeeping. I was updating the inventory of my own life. The problem was that Laura hadn't realized yet that she'd become the forgotten Tupperware in the back of the fridge. I didn't print the spreadsheet. That wasn't the point. I just wanted it to exist. Once it did, I decided the next step was a meeting. Not a conversation. A meeting. With structure. So I sent her an invite. Subject, discussion. Next steps. Time, 7 p.m. Location, living room. Duration, 45 minutes, optional extension if needed. I even included an agenda. Opening comments, observations, goals moving forward, mutually agreed next actions. She didn't respond to the invite, but she saw it. I know because I watched her open the email, close it, and then spend 15 minutes on her phone, probably texting Denise something along the lines of, "He's completely lost it." Which was fine. Let them workshop that. I had a meeting to prep for. When 7 o'clock rolled around, I was already sitting on the couch with a notepad. Not because I needed to take notes, but because it annoyed her. She came in wearing the face of someone who has agreed to attend a neighborhood zoning board meeting under protest. "Seriously," she said, arms folded. "Have a seat," I replied, flipping the page like I had backup slides. She sat, slowly. No eye contact. No expression. Just a blank screen waiting for a script. "I assume you know why we're here," I said. "You mean besides the fact that our marriage has turned into a conference call?" I smiled. "Exactly that." A long pause followed. Laura has never been good at silence. She likes to fill it, usually with corrections or stories she finds funnier than they actually are. "I didn't cheat," she said, breaking first. "I never said you did. But you're acting like." "I'm not acting. I'm documenting. There's a difference." She exhaled. The kind of exhale you do when your internet freezes during a video. "Okay, Jason. Fine. You think I've been, what? Emotionally unavailable? Distant? I think you've been emotionally freelancing." That got her. She looked at me like I'd invented a new insult. Maybe I had. "I've been dealing with stuff," she said, the official anthem of people who don't want to specify anything. "I'm not interested in parsing vague feelings. This isn't therapy. This is triage." She blinked. "Triage? Yeah. I'm deciding which part of this situation is still worth saving. And more importantly, which part is dead weight." Laura went quiet again, tapping her fingers against her leg. A tic she usually saved for waiting rooms and awkward family dinners. "I didn't plan any of this," she said finally. "I believe that. You're not much of a planner." Her lips tightened. "You know, sarcasm doesn't help." "Disagree. It's how I stay engaged." She looked away. "So what now? Are you kicking me out?" "No. I'm doing something worse." She turned back. "Worse. I'm giving you options." And I did. I handed her a printed document because, unlike her emotional discretion, I prefer things in writing. At the top, mutual exit strategy draft, subject to revision. She stared at the page like it was in a foreign language. It wasn't. It was very clearly in Times New Roman. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a proposed plan. For separation. Civil, fair, logistical." "You wrote a draft?" "Yep. 3 pages. Bullet points. No legalese. Just suggestions. You can read it when you're ready." She skimmed it anyway. Her eyes stopped on bullet 4. "Both parties agree not to fabricate narratives when discussing the reason for the split. No blame casting. Just a mutual acknowledgement that the expiration date arrived earlier than expected." "You wrote that?" she asked, quieter now. "Would you prefer I outsourced it to Spencer?" She stood up. Not abruptly. More like she was trying to prove she could still make a decision without losing her balance. "So that's it? You're done?" "I was done 3 revelations ago. I'm just late filing the paperwork." She didn't reply. Just stood there, holding the document like it might catch fire. "I'll give you space," I said, standing too. "You can stay here for a week. After that, you'll need to decide where you want to be." I assume Spencer's calendar is wide open. She flinched at that one. Not much, but enough. And then I did something unexpected. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the garage door opener, and held it out. "You'll need this," I said. "For what?" "For freedom. Or furniture. Whichever comes first." She didn't take it. So I placed it gently on the coffee table, next to the folders she never bothered to label. Meeting adjourned. Laura didn't bring up the exit plan again for 3 days. Not a word. She walked around the house like she was auditioning for a silent film, occasionally making noise just to prove she still existed. At one point, she organized the spice rack alphabetically, then redid it chronologically by expiration date. That's when I knew things were getting serious. She was down to distractions you normally save for dental waiting rooms and jury duty. Meanwhile, I spent those days doing what any soon-to-be ex-husband who has a spreadsheet for emotional damage would do. I made appointments. Not therapy, not legal consultations. Bank, storage unit, change of address form at the post office. I wasn't breaking down, I was checking out. I moved into the guest room that Wednesday. No announcement, no fanfare. Just picked up my pillow and some clothes, walked down the hall, and set up camp like I'd booked a stay in my own house. She noticed, of course. She's not blind. But she didn't say anything until Friday. She came into the guest room around 9 p.m., not knocking, not apologizing. She stood in the doorway like someone who just remembered they left their phone charger in another person's life. "So, is this how it ends?" she asked. I was folding laundry. Underwear, if it matters. Which it does, because folding your own underwear while being asked existential questions by your soon-to-be former spouse is a level of poetic awkwardness I don't think anyone is fully prepared for. I looked up. Yes. Neatly, ideally. She stepped inside. No sudden movements. Like I was a deer, and she'd read somewhere that panic gestures scare people going through transitions. Don't you think this is a bit extreme? Only if you ignore everything that led up to it. I haven't done anything unforgivable. You haven't done anything at all. That's the problem. She sat on the edge of the bed, my new bed, technically, and gave me this look that was probably supposed to be reflective, thoughtful, like she was searching for the right script in a drawer full of expired monologues. I got caught up, she finally said, which, let's face it, is the starter pack for people who don't want to take responsibility but are too tired to argue. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Got caught up? Like laundry in a ceiling fan. She didn't appreciate that. I never meant to hurt you, she said. Another classic. What did you mean to do? Strengthen our communication skills through mutual dishonesty? Laura sighed like I was the unreasonable one. She crossed her arms, leaned back a little. You've changed, Jason. No, I've stopped pretending I'm okay with your version of normal. There's a difference. I don't even know what you want anymore. That's convenient. I've been saying it clearly for years. This wasn't a fight. It was a meeting with no agenda left. The final review before shutting down the project. I stood up and opened the top drawer of the desk I'd pulled into the room earlier. Pulled out a folder and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, flipping through it like it might contain a surprise twist that would cast her as the misunderstood protagonist. Those are the forms. All filled out. Not submitted yet, but ready. She looked down at them. Divorce paperwork, neat and unhighlighted. No red ink. No commentary. You really planned this out. Well, when you're in a relationship with someone who thinks nostalgia counts as fidelity, planning becomes second nature. Laura closed the folder, but didn't hand it back. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, she said. That's probably the most honest thing you've said in a while. Another silence followed. One of those mutual acknowledgments that nothing clever or strategic would fix the situation. We weren't on the edge of something dramatic. We were in the middle of something expired. I kept waiting for you to yell, she said. Get mad. Be dramatic. Something. I don't need to perform. I just need to leave. And what? Start over. Just like that. Yeah, just like that. But without the speech. I'm not applying for a fresh start. I'm just unsubscribing from this one. Laura stood again. She didn't move toward the door yet. Just looked at me like maybe she could still rewrite her part in the story if she stared long enough. You think you're better than me now? She asked, voice flat. No, I think I'm better without you. Important distinction. You'll regret this. I've regretted staying quiet. Not this. She held the folder in both hands now, gripping it like it might dissolve. I didn't say anything else. I was done giving her new material. She left the room 5 minutes later. I moved out 2 weeks after that. There was no scene. No neighbors watching. No dramatic packing montage. I didn't leave in the middle of the night. And I didn't leave her a long letter filled with personal growth metaphors and unreadable handwriting. I moved on a Saturday. Loaded my car, made 2 trips, and dropped off the key on the counter like it was the end of a short-term lease. She texted me a few days later. Do you want to talk? I replied, I think we covered everything. Check the agenda if you're unsure. That was the last message. Funny thing is, I didn't feel sad. Not in the tragic sense. More like I just finished a class I should have dropped 3 semesters ago. What's next? Nothing dramatic. I got a small apartment. Clean. Simple. The thermostat works, and the bedroom doesn't echo with someone else's avoidance. I see my brother more. He's recently divorced too, but he earned it by being lazy. We laugh about how neither of us is built for subtle betrayal, so we stick to board games and direct conversations. I picked up drawing again. Terrible at it, but it's honest. I started labeling my folders without sarcasm. And every now and then, someone asks what happened. I tell them it ended like most things end, with one person waiting for the other to say what they already knew. And the weirdest part? I didn't lose anything. I just stopped pretending I hadn't. That's freedom. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just done. And better. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel